D&D number 2, Suffer the Children in Jesus' Name. Epilogue. Peering from the second-story nursery window, Toby Nash watched an angel across the grounds. Her silvery white dress, combined with her silky blonde hair, gave her an ethereal glow. She'd allowed her hair to grow longer during her pregnancy, and it blew back softly from her face in the breeze. Dressed for the night's outing, she walked slowly down by the creek that inhabited part of their backyard, stopping to smile up at the late afternoon sun, or to touch a flower, or to listen to birdsong. Every so often her hand stroked her belly in a protective maternal gesture. He breathed a contented sigh. Every morning he woke reminding himself that this was not all just a wonderful dream, and then he gave thanks. They were happy and definitely vibrating on high, he thought, remembering that short lesson his friend Ricky Kino had given him. So happy. Each minute for them was a treasure chest waiting to be opened. He turned from the window to inspect the room. Caroline had decorated what was to be their daughter's nursery with all the things she'd never had and always wanted. Lacy coverlets, colorful mobiles, teddy bears, and ballerinas. She'd been in heaven picking out the furniture without having to worry about how to pay for it. She'd actually never even been in a place that exclusively sold furniture. Like a kid in a candy store, she'd had a terrible time making up her mind and an even worse time keeping herself from calculating the cost. Seeing her brow creased and her mouth in a pout, he'd had a crisis of his own, keeping himself from thinking about making love to her. The experience of shopping for their child made him realize how much fun it was going to be to shower Caroline with all the things she'd never experienced. He bought her a car, but she wouldn't have any of the fancy ones he tried to talk her into. No Corvette, no Jaguar, no Cadillac or Mercedes, no BMW. She'd wanted a pickup. She said she was the wife of a farmer/country singer, and it just seemed right. He'd asked her if maybe she wanted a tractor to go along with it, which had caused a delightful wrestling match. They'd planned and built the house in a wonderful, haphazard sort of way down by the swimming hole. She drove the architect crazy, but she wanted the house to be one with nature. She'd asked the gardener to teach her about plants and flowers, and now that it was almost spring, the fruits of their labors were becoming evident. He smiled as he looked back out the window. Each time he saw her, it took his breath away. She'd worked hard over the last 8 months. Even before she was completely healed from the gunshot wound, she was out, doing, and planning. When he'd asked her to slow down, she'd tell him there was so much to do and she didn't want to waste one moment. She said they had a wedding to plan, a house to build, a dance school to open, and love to make. And when she put it that way, it was difficult to argue with her. He'd been busy too, first helping her, and then cutting an album that had barely made its release in time for the award it was up for tonight. Tonight, Toby Nash and his beautiful wife would attend the People's Music Awards. He was up for Best Hit Single, Country Entertainer of the Year, and Album of the Year, thanks to Caroline. She'd encouraged him to write about their love, their life, and the things they'd learned. It had been almost too easy because it was from the heart, and every song had been an instant hit. As predicted by his friend Evan, the album he'd cut with Crazy 88 had also reached the top, not having been hurt at all by the publicity he'd received during the past year. As Toby gazed at her from the window, Caroline put her hand to the small of her back. Toby frowned. Maybe he should ask her to stay home tonight where she would be comfortable, though he already knew she wouldn't hear of it. She'd convinced him that they would be fine because the awards were in Nashville this year, and if she were to go into labor, they would be close to her doctor and the hospital. As he watched, Caroline's head jerked suddenly in surprise. She was smiling, but he watched in horror as Rascal bounded from the woods, headed straight toward her. The large dog jumped on her, causing her to stumble backward a few steps. Toby raised the window. "Rascal!" his voice boomed. "Get down! Now!" The dog obeyed immediately and lumbered away, his tail tucked between his legs. Caroline turned her smile up toward the window, but Toby didn't smile in return. Rascal had left 2 muddy paw prints on the front of Caroline's designer maternity dress. She'd agonized over its choice for 2 months. He closed the window and headed down, approaching her from the rear. He circled her with his arms, nibbling on her neck. She leaned her head back against him. "Hey, darling," he whispered in her ear. "I was just wondering if maybe we should stay home tonight. You're 2 weeks overdue. The baby could come any time, and it worries me." She patted his arm where he held her. "I'm okay, Toby. As I told you, if I go into labor, we'll be closer to the hospital in Nashville than we are here." "Well, that's true," he conceded, "but I hate to be the one to tell you this. Well, look down." She did, then back up at Toby with a sigh. "I suppose I need to go in and see if I can wash off the mud, and if not, I guess it will be a great conversation piece for the media." "You're incredible, you know that?" "Why's that?" "Well, any other woman would be throwing a fit right about now." She shrugged. "Well, remember what I said in the hospital when I first woke up?" He nuzzled her cheek. "No, tell me," he murmured. I I can't remember either when you do that. Now stop." He raised his head. "Okay, now tell me." She sighed. "I said I will never worry about all the small stuff again, and dirt on my dress is definitely small stuff." "Well, what if I told you no wife of mine is going to be seen at a huge award show looking like she'd just been drug in by a dog?" She turned to face him. "Tobias Smith, don't you dare try to strong-arm me, because I promise you, you will lose." He smiled. Meek little Caroline was no longer a victim. She'd come such a long way and was strong and happy and so very sexy, even in her cumbersome condition. "I love it when you talk tough," he teased, "but I think I have just decided that I'm not going to allow you to go to the awards, for your own good. You're already tired. I can see it in your eyes. I think I'm going to get my mom to come down here and keep you company tonight." Caroline reached up and grabbed a handful of his hair. "Don't you dare!" She yanked. "Ow! You're asking for it, little girl," he threatened. "Yes, I am," she purred, lifting her mouth for a kiss. "Now there's an invitation I cannot turn down." He rubbed a finger along her jaw, tilting her head up, and lowered his mouth to hers. "Come on, darling. Let's go inside and see what can be done for that dress." Hand in hand, they walked up to their beautiful new home. New scene. Caroline nervously grabbed Toby's hand as the limousine drew near to their destination. He looked down at her. "Everything's going to be okay. You can't even tell you've been drug around by a 90-pound dog." She laughed. "I'm not so worried about that, but all the media, they make me nervous." His brow furrowed. "Well, it's too late now to do anything about it. We're here. You look positively radiant and beautiful." She looked up at his face. He believed that. She could tell he truly thought her to be beautiful. She would have to trust him on that. Then again, he thought Rascal was beautiful too. Sighing, she decided to talk about something else to occupy her rampant thoughts while they waited in line to disembark. "I spoke to Sherry's mom today." "So, how's she doing?" "They're going to release her from the psychiatric hospital into a halfway house next week. They're going to let her take classes and get her high school diploma. She's doing very well, and she's been able to work through all the terrible things her father did to her. It's been hard on her mother and little brother as well, and they have all been attending counseling sessions together, and I think they're going to be okay. I just wish they hadn't had to go through all of this, just because some low-life man couldn't keep his hands off his own daughter." She shuddered. Toby took her hands. "Well, who knows what happened to him to make him do what he did? If you've taught me anything, it's that we can't judge another human being." "You're right. Who knows? Abuse is a vicious cycle, but I've learned so much, and one of the most important things I've learned is we can change our future with God's help. We don't have to go willingly down the path that was set for us. We can wake up and become conscious of our thoughts and actions and break the cycle." Squeezing her hand, Toby smiled. "You're not the same scared little girl anymore. Are you happy, Caroline?" "Very." He nodded toward the window as the limo door was opened. "Here we go." She smiled up at him. "Lord, I hope I don't trip or something equally embarrassing. Don't let go of me, okay?" "Not for the world." Toby stepped out onto the red carpet and turned immediately to help Caroline from the limo. She stood, straightened her shoulders, smoothed her dress. He waited for her. His eyes met hers, and she nodded. He turned and tucked her arm in his as they began their walk amidst the murmurs and applause and even a few screams of the onlookers. Cameras clicked away, lights flashed. They were stopped several times as they progressed down the carpet by different hosts of programs and their affiliates. The interviewers were very nice, Caroline thought, and friendly, and professional, and no one was demeaning or condescending. They all seemed genuinely interested in her. Toby stroked her arm and smiled down at her frequently, showing he was proud to have her by his side. She was grateful to him for his sensitivity. Nevertheless, Caroline was relieved when they were finally settled in their seats. Toby would have to perform later, but for now she had him with her. She sighed heavily. Toby had been right. She was tired. And before they'd been able to sit, he'd taken her around and introduced her to some of his friends. She kept forgetting that he was a celebrity, and of course his friends would also be celebrities. She'd had to remind herself to close her mouth when he'd introduced her to Reba McEntire, and she'd asked if she'd recovered completely from the kidnapping. And then she was hugged by Jason Aldean as he congratulated Toby on his luck at having found such a beautiful girl who could actually put up with him. When she sighed again, Toby tilted her face up to look at her closely. Everything okay, Princess? Uh-huh, I'm just tired. It's all so exciting. I guess it's taking it out of me. Do you think it would be possible to get a drink of water? Anything for you, darling, Toby said as he rose, but Jeff arrived at the same time. Jeff, my man, how's it going? It's going great, Jeff answered as he leaned down to kiss Caroline's cheek. Where are you headed? Caroline needs water, he said as he smiled at the woman standing beside his friend. Jeff had told him he had a new girl. Hello, Toby said, offering his hand. Bethany, meet Caroline, Jeff said. Oh, and Toby Nash. Nice to meet you, Bethany said with a smile. Caroline started to get up. Oh, no, please don't get up, Bethany cried. At that moment, a muscular guy clapped a hand on Toby's shoulder. Toby, good to see you. Toby turned with a giant smile. Rick! Though Ricky Keno was shorter than Toby, he gave him a giant bear hug and lifted the larger man off the floor. Ricky Keno, what are you doing here? Ricky grinned. Florida Georgia Line did the music for my latest movie, so the powers that be asked me to present the award for Best Album. So here I am. Toby nodded. It's a great movie, and they wrote some great music. Ricky smiled. Yes, they did. So you won't be upset if they win? How could I be? Just being alive and having Caroline with me and being able to do what I love to do, that's enough reward. Speaking of Caroline, Ricky said as he moved past Toby. He knelt in the aisle right beside her. Caroline, he said reverently, it's so nice to see you again. Toby was right. About what? You really do glow like an angel. Oh, please. I have to go, but I'll be back to visit once that baby is born. Oh, and Bree and Shelley came home from their visit with you, swearing that you are the most impressive woman they'd ever met, and they have all kinds of girly gifts to bring to you in person. Caroline laughed. I am looking forward to seeing them again. They are so sweet. Well, Shelley definitely is, unless you make her mad, so I'll see you soon. Come see us any time you'd like, Caroline offered. Ricky nodded. Thank you. I will. He rose and his mouth dropped open in surprise as he moved out of the aisle. Bethany? Bethany also stood with her mouth wide open. Ricky? They hugged tightly as Jeff and Toby watched in surprise. The introduction to Jeff came quickly, along with explanations of how Ricky met Bethany in Daytona back a few years earlier when Shelley was training for the Mart. They dated a few times. The conversation turned to coincidences, and it being a small world, and a few minutes later, Ricky Keno was gone. Caroline shook her head. It never diminishes. What? Toby asked. I don't even know what to call it. His aura? His light? His power? He swoops in, spills his light over everyone, then flies away. Toby nodded. That's a great description. It sounds like song lyrics. He leaned toward Caroline. I'll get your water. Be right back. Bethany and Jeff took their seats next to Toby's. While Toby was gone, Ace arrived with his date, Sheila, and Billy Bob arrived with twin sisters, each holding on to an arm of one of the brothers. Toby returned with an icy cold bottle of water for Caroline and introduced himself to the females in the group, and as they chatted before the show started, Caroline was distressed to feel the tightening of her abdomen. She'd had many Braxton Hicks contractions, but they'd never caused any discomfort. Did she feel a slight pain now? No, she worried too much. She breathed deeply, hoping the excitement of the evening was the cause of her dilemma. She had no desire to go into labor and ruin the night for Toby. His award categories would be some of the last announced, and she had to make it through. It would only be a few hours, and after that, her daughter could come any time she wanted. Still, as the evening progressed, Caroline was forced to admit to herself that she was indeed feeling pain. Nothing she couldn't handle, but she had a feeling she was in the very early stages of labor. She didn't dare tell Toby yet. He would whisk her away to the hospital in a flash, and it would ruin his evening. This night was for him. He deserved it. Besides, labor could go on for many hours. She may as well spend those hours here with her mind occupied. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Toby took her hand and smiled at her. "Feeling okay?" he whispered. Caroline smiled back. "I'm fine, Toby. Now stop asking me that." He raised her fingers to his mouth and kissed them. Close to the end of the program, Toby and his band left their women with kisses on the cheeks and made their way backstage. Caroline glanced at her watch and took a breath. What had started out as slight pain had progressed over the past hour or so into regular labor. She was almost sure of it. The contractions were becoming stronger, strong enough to make her dread the next one, and they were coming every 20 minutes on the dot. It seemed the award show was moving in slow motion, and the men going backstage was a signal that it wouldn't be much longer, and she was grateful for that. Jeff's new girlfriend, Bethany, leaned over and tapped Caroline on the shoulder. Caroline looked up to see the womenfolk of Toby's band members all looking at her. "You're in labor, aren't you?" Bethany asked. Caroline started to shake her head when Ace's date spoke up. "Don't deny it. I can tell. I have 3 children of my own. How far apart are the contractions?" Caroline sighed. 20 minutes. "How bad?" Caroline frowned. "Pretty bad." "And you didn't tell Toby because you didn't want to ruin his time in the spotlight, right?" Caroline shrugged guiltily. "I think I can hold on. We're almost done now." "Well, promise me you'll tell me if it gets down to 10 minutes apart, because that's about as close as you want to push it, believe me." Caroline nodded. "I promise." They looked up from their conversation as Toby Nash was introduced, singing his hit song from the nominated Album of the Year, In the Wink of an Eye. Unfortunately, a contraction began just as Toby did, and Caroline gasped as it hit her harder than the others. And Bethany and Sheila moved to sit on either side of Caroline. Sheila took her hand. "Okay, honey, breathe for me." Caroline nodded. "Y'all watch the guys, please. Don't make it look obvious, or I swear Toby will jump down off that stage on national television and make a big scene." The women all turned their heads and smiled up toward the stage. Caroline had to laugh. "It's over," she sighed, checking her watch. "And?" Sheila asked. "And it's down to 18 minutes." She sniffed. She was such a crybaby. "Oh, sweetie, don't cry. It'll be okay," Bethany comforted. Caroline quickly wiped at the tears. "The song's almost over. Get ready to give them a standing ovation." They looked up toward the stage. They had no idea how their men had performed. They assumed the performance great as usual as they sprang to their feet, applauding heartily. Caroline knew the cameras would be trained on her to see her reaction to her husband. She rose carefully, clapping her hands and blowing a kiss to her husband on stage. Unfortunately, standing had been a bad idea. Gravity came into play. It was as if everything inside Caroline's body suddenly had room to shift downward. Another contraction began immediately, and Caroline gripped her abdomen and sat down quickly. "Oh, no," she whimpered. "It's not even been 5 minutes," Sheila informed her. "We have to get you out of here." "No, wait," Caroline said breathlessly through the pain. "It's just because I stood up so quickly. They'll slow back down, I'm sure of it." "Well, you'd better hope so, or you're going to be having a baby on national television." New scene. Toby and the guys joked around backstage. They would announce the winner of the Album of the Year next, and they were told to stay put until after the presentation. Toby motioned to the backstage cameraman. "You want to get a visual of the prettiest girl here tonight?" "Let me guess," the man answered. "Would it be the woman in row 3, seat 4? Toby watched as the cameraman panned the audience. He focused in on Caroline, then started to move on. "Wait," Toby said, stopping him. "What the heck?" Toby, Jeff called. Ricky just announced our name. We just won. Are you going out there or not? Toby looked up, then back at the camera. Focus on her again. He watched as she came into view. Caroline's lips were pursed as if she were blowing out. Her hands gripped her belly. Toby, Jeff called. Now! Toby looked up, his brow creased with a moment of indecision. Finally, he ran past Jeff and out on the stage. He quickly grabbed the award and moved to the podium. Thank you, everyone. Please don't think I'm being ungrateful, but I believe I've just discovered that my wife is about to have our baby. There was a murmuring from the audience as the cameras panned, but the backstage camera was already there, focused in on her face as she grimaced in pain, then moving to view her swollen belly. Someone do me a favor and call an ambulance. He was at her side in seconds. It's okay, baby. We're going to get you to a hospital. She nodded. Toby, I'm sorry. I tried to make her wait. I didn't want to mess up your night. You could never mess up my night, but you should have told me. How far apart are the contractions? 4 minutes, Sheila answered. If I help you, can you stand so we can get out of here? She nodded. Slowly, he pulled her to her feet, but the moment Caroline was fully upright, she felt a strange sensation. A tiny ploop was how she would later describe it. A second later, there was a splash as Caroline's water broke. She looked up at Toby, eyes wide. He was calm. So calm. It's okay, he comforted, but I'm not going to have you walk. He scooped her up in front of the world and carried her out to the lobby. He helped her lie down on one of the padded benches. Oh, Toby, she cried as another contraction hit, the worst one yet. Breathe, baby, breathe. Jeff and the guys joined Toby and the women. "Aw, man, she's really having the baby?" Jeff asked in a panic. "You guys keep the cameras away, please," Toby commanded. "Where is the ambulance?" Caroline felt as if someone had a vice grip on her, squeezing, never ending. She reached out for Toby in a panic as the next wave of pain started its crescendo. Oh no, here comes another one. She was scared. She never dreamed it would hurt this much. How close, Sheila? She shook her head. They're coming one right after another. Toby took a breath and threw off his jacket. Jeff, Ace, give me your jackets. He placed his jacket under Caroline's hips. I have to see, Caroline. She understood. Allowed him to remove her underclothing. He draped one of the jackets over her knees and looked at the situation. How is he staying so calm? Bethany asked. Any other man would be running around like an idiot by now. He's a farm boy, Jeff answered. He's brought horses, calves, puppies, kittens, you name it, into the world. Toby looked up at Jeff. The look he gave him let him know he was not nearly as calm as he appeared. Caroline, she's coming. I can see the head. He smiled at her to keep her calm. She has a head full of dark hair. Ricky Keno arrived, fending off the cameras like a pro and making a barrier between the crowd and Caroline. I'm sorry, Toby. I didn't mean for this to happen, Caroline cried. I thought it would be a long time. I thought I could make it. Shh, now this is a happy time. Yeah, it's a really happy time, Jeff added, because the EMTs just got here. Toby looked up, relief on his face. As the EMTs approached, Caroline cried out, Oh, Toby, the baby's coming. It hurts so much. The medic barely had time to kneel beside her. Toby moved out of the way just in time for the medic to catch the head. Hold on now, the man said as he pulled on gloves. Don't push. Pant. That's right, just pant. Little small breaths. Caroline looked up at Toby as she did as ordered. He smiled at her. You're going to have a baby in just a minute. She closed her eyes with the pain of the next contraction. Open your eyes, the EMT ordered, and look at me. Okay, now, push with this contraction. Push. Atta girl. You're very strong. Push. Don't stop. She let out her air with a whoosh. Take another breath and push, he ordered. Toby helped hold her up slightly. Push, baby. You can do it. Caroline squealed as the baby moved forward into the light. Immediate relief washed over her, first from the vanishing pain, and second from the sound of their daughter's healthy cry. She laughed with elation and cried with happiness, and Toby kissed her over and over. You did it, Caroline. We have a daughter. New scene. Toby stood in the threshold of their little nursery, watching as Caroline held their baby daughter to her breast. What an amazing sight. Procreation, a true gift from God. The baby was only 4 weeks old, yet he couldn't remember life without her. The same for his wife, his beautiful Princess Caroline. They decided to name their daughter the same name as another princess, Princess Grace. It was the name of the wonderful nurse who had taken care of Caroline. It was also what they'd found in Jesus when they'd found each other. In only 4 weeks, the name had mutated into Gracie, and Gracie already acted like a princess, for she truly ruled the roost. Caroline stroked Gracie's cheek as she nursed, cooing to her. Less than a year ago, Toby and Caroline were living in a world of hurt. Neither one of them believed real love was possible. Caroline thought she could never be a mother, while Toby was planning a loveless marriage. Since that time, their world had completely changed, all because God had a plan. Our God is an awesome God, Toby thought, his heart full to bursting. Hey, darling, Toby whispered from where he stood. Caroline looked up. I love it when you say that. He grinned. I love it when you tell me that you love it, but most of all, I love you. She smiled. I know. And that is the end of book number 2, Suffer the Children in Jesus' Name. Stay tuned for book number 3, Finding Home in Jesus' Name.